Hello, this is Pei Zhang, and this is our last presentation for this course. I hope you have enjoyed these courses. We will be discussing transferring cultural references in this presentation. An Arab proverb says, "He who does not understand a look cannot understand long explanations." As we have already seen, some of the most specialized textual genres, such as research papers and in particular original articles, are highly standardized internationally. However, as we move along the continuum of medical written communication, genres and texts become more localized in specific cultural settings and, as a consequence, may reflect cultural elements, such as systems of weights and measures, references to health systems and administrative systems, social norms when dealing with ethnic groups, disabled groups, sex groups, etc., varying degrees of formality and tenor, elements of popular knowledge, degree of democratization of medical knowledge, differences in the patient-physician relationship, average medical education of population, status and prestige of a given medical tradition, differences in basic notions to do with senses, such as hot, cold, sweet, etc. Here we will reflect on how culture permeates the texts in each linguistic community, determining and shaping style, meanings, and terminology, and thus becoming a focal point of study and observation for any medical translator. Defining culture in translation. Despite the many attempts to define culture, no agreement has been reached so as to its nature, perhaps unsurprisingly, since instability is its main feature. At first glance, spotting a cultural reference in the text may seem a straightforward task, but culture, understood as a manifestation of reality in a given context, is not objective, for its connotations may vary according to beliefs and values, producing different mind maps of the world. We would like to suggest the following operative definition of cultural reference adapted to translation purposes. Any kind of expression, textual, verbal, nonverbal, or audiovisual, denoting any material, ecological, social, religious, linguistic, or emotional manifestation that can be attributed to a particular community, geographic, socio-economic, professional, linguistic, religious, etc., and would be admitted as a trait of that community by those who admit themselves to be members of it. Such an expression may, on occasions, create a comprehension or translation problem. As can be inferred from this definition, one person can belong to several different cultural communities, and although not all the members of the community will accept these manifestations as true or even like them, they will recognize them as belonging to their community. Noticing cultural references. Observing and reading about the communities involved can be accompanied by the exploration and practice of techniques that can help to solve the translation problems further, such as chunking, that is, finding alternatives to the cultural blocking problem. Through chunking up, down, or sideways, the translator changes the size and the viewpoint of the problematic segment when there's no correspondence. From subatomic to universal, from concrete to abstract, from one way of viewing the world to another, from one cultural framework to another. Cultural elements in medical communication. Although culture permeates texts and can be considered at a macro level, affecting genres, conventions, functions, styles and tone, and so on, specific translation procedures for solving micro-level translation problems related to culture references can prove useful. As a starting point for reflection, try to find examples in your own language combination when translating. Whether, as a translator, we will choose these procedures closer to the target language and culture, or those that will keep the source language and culture flavor of the text, will depend on the translation assignment. When you find exoticism, that is, when the source language is kept with no changes in the translation. Cultural borrowing is when a source language word or expression is rendered without change in the target language. Calque is when the target language is similar to the source language or expression but does not conform to the target language rules. Transliteration. The cultural reference is changed according to the phonic or graphic conventions of the target language. Communicative. The source language reference has an identifiable correspondence in the target language that is not a literal translation. And the cultural transplantation is when the reference has been completely adapted to the target culture. It has been substituted by a reference which is more in accordance with its norms or has been changed for ideological reasons. Communicating medical information to patients and what the experts say, bridging the cultural gaps. Emotion is also a key word in the operative definition of culture. It is undeniable that it plays a central role in relationship between doctors and patients, as well as between writers, translators, and readers, especially when they belong to different communities. An increasing number of publications and courses that deal with this issue are underway, such as the one that developed by the UCI, to prepare future doctors to serve a growing Latino population that often lacks access to healthcare. It offers both intensive language and cultural training, for the organizers believe doctors should not only know how to heal, but also understand the culture and lifestyle of their patients, including diets, problems in their neighborhoods, and family ties. It is extremely useful to be aware of these issues and to complement your readings with texts on community interpreting, where transcultural misunderstandings are also discussed. High context versus low context cultures. There are some cultures that are high context and some that are low context. For context ranking of cultures, we find that low context cultures are Swiss, German, Scandinavian, North American. And as we go up the ladder, we find French, English, Italian, Latin American, Arabic, and Japanese are very high context cultures, meaning that the information has to be implicitly received. Whereas in the low context cultures, the information has to be explicitly conveyed. We should pay attention to 4 things. Quantity. As much information as is needed should be given, not more and not less. Quality. The truth should be told, not anything for which there is no evidence. Relevance. Say only what matters. Manner. Be clear, direct, and avoid ambiguity. Degrees of cultural immersion. How many foreign languages do you speak? How many communities do you think you belong to? How many countries have you visited? According to some scholars, there are 4 levels of cultural immersion. Facts, stereotypes, and deficiencies. That's the first level. At this stage, there's still a large comprehension gap between the source culture and the target culture. Level 2 is shallow comprehension. Subtle traits in the thought and behavior of the foreign culture community are discerned. Level 3, in-depth comprehension. The target culture is accepted and the reasons behind certain modes of behavior are understood. And level 4 is empathy. This stage can only be achieved by immersion in the foreign culture. Sophisticated cross-cultural communication almost certainly requires translators to be at stages 3 or 4. This is definitely one of the most fascinating areas in which a translator can be immersed, complex and rewarding as well as difficult to master. Can we apply this to medical translation or interpreting? Have you ever visited a doctor abroad or had to address him or her in a foreign language? Reflect on your experience.